In the tranquil suburban neighborhood of Oakwood Drive, the afternoon of March 15, 2022, was shattered at approximately 1 p.m. Bob Harper, entering their bedroom, stumbled upon a chilling sight. His wife Sandra lay naked and lifeless on their bed, strangled with her own panties. His heart racing and hands trembling, Bob grasped his phone to dial 911. Swiftly, the 911 operator responded, and Bob, voice quivering with disbelief and fear, reported, "My wife? She's not breathing. I think she's dead." The operator remained on the line, asking questions to calm him and gather details while dispatching emergency services. Minutes later, the Harper residence was filled with the wail of sirens. Paramedics rushed in, their expressions grave and focused. In the bedroom, they confirmed Bob's dreadful suspicion. Sandra was indeed gone. Sandra Harper, a 41-year-old educator residing in Savannah, Georgia, was beloved by all who knew her. She was renowned for her kindness and devotion to her students at Ellis Elementary School. Living in a grand, beautiful home on Arsley Park with her husband Bob, Sandra had graduated from the University of Georgia with an education degree and had taught for nearly 2 decades. She was deeply involved in her community, actively participating in her church's events and programs, and was a member of a local book club that met every Thursday evening. She had a particular fondness for mystery novels, especially those penned by Agatha Christie. Sandra's family was close-knit. Her parents, James and Margaret Collins, lived nearby and visited frequently. Though she and Bob had no children, they were very close to their niece Jenny, who resided in the same neighborhood. Sandra's warm and inviting personality made her a beacon of positivity to colleagues and friends, always ready to lend a helping hand or offer a listening ear. In the days preceding her demise, Sandra eagerly anticipated a weekend getaway with Bob to Tybee Island. She had planned this surprise trip to celebrate their 17th wedding anniversary, hoping to rekindle their recently strained relationship. Her final days were filled with joy and anticipation, oblivious to the tragic fate that awaited her. Promptly, the police were on the scene, headed by Detective Linda Martinez and her partner, Detective John Harris. Renowned for her scrupulous eye for detail, Detective Martinez, alongside Detective Harris, known for his intuitive understanding of human behavior, commenced their investigation immediately. Detective Harris ushered Bob Harper away from the tumultuous scene inside, inviting him to sit on the porch to answer some questions. He inquired about Bob's whereabouts on the night of the murder. Bob asserted he was away on business, recounting his discovery of Sandra upon his return and the subsequent call to 911. His voice was barely audible, his confusion and grief palpable as he struggled to comprehend who would want to harm his wife. Concurrently, Detective Martinez swiftly scrutinized the crime scene, her expression darkening as she surveyed the disarray in the bedroom. 2 elegant glasses lay on the floor, an unopened champagne bottle rested by the dresser, and a bucket of melted ice stood nearby. A satin nightgown was draped over a lamp on the nightstand. Bed covers were cast aside, sheets untucked. Sandra's body lay naked on the bed, her panties wrapped around her neck, her face marred by signs of a brutal struggle. The scene was both devastating and unsettling. With no indications of forced entry, it appeared Sandra knew her assailant, and a romantic encounter had taken a violent turn. The autopsy would provide more answers. The detectives were meticulous, ensuring no detail was overlooked. Detective Martinez began collecting evidence, diligently lifting fingerprints from various surfaces, hoping to find a match in the police database. Meanwhile, Detective Harris focused on photographing the scene, documenting every piece of evidence. They discovered the panties used as the murder weapon, carefully bagging them for further analysis. DNA samples were collected from under Sandra's fingernails, suggesting she might have scratched her attacker in self-defense. Outside, the forensic team arrived and commenced their work. Using specialized lighting, they searched for bodily fluids that could offer additional clues. Hair samples and fibers were collected from the bed and surrounding area. Each piece of evidence was vital in reconstructing the events leading to Sandra's tragic end. Neighbors began to congregate, murmuring among themselves, their gazes fixed on the Harper house with worry. Those who knew Sandra were incredulous, unable to fathom that such a horrific act could befall someone so kind and caring. Throughout the advancing afternoon, Detectives Martinez and Harris pressed on with their investigation, steadfast in their pursuit of truth and justice for Sandra and her mourning family. They understood that solving this heinous crime demanded a meticulous and systematic approach. Their relentless drive fueled their efforts to uncover the perpetrator behind Sandra's murder. The initial individual called to the police station for interrogation was Sandra's husband, Bob Harper. At 43, Bob was a prosperous real estate entrepreneur in Savannah, Georgia, recognized for his charismatic and sociable demeanor. Often labeled a social butterfly, he could be vain and somewhat narcissistic, always preoccupied with preserving his attractive and youthful image. Nevertheless, his ambition and respect within his field were undeniable. Detectives Martinez and Harris led the interrogation, probing Bob's whereabouts on the night of Sandra's murder. Bob asserted he was away on business, evaluating properties. They pressed him for particulars about his trip. Bob recounted departing the previous morning and staying overnight in Atlanta, presenting hotel receipts and emails to corroborate his alibi. However, Bob's keenness to validate his story raised the detectives' suspicions. Though cooperative and forthcoming, his repeated unsolicited assertions of innocence and frequent glances at his watch struck them as peculiar. His fidgeting hands hinted at unease, uncommon for someone grieving a loved one. The detectives resolved to delve deeper into Bob's activities. Commencing their scrutiny, the detectives examined security footage from the Atlanta hotel where Bob purportedly stayed. The video showed Bob checking in on March 14, 2022. About an hour later, an individual concealed in a hoodie and large sunglasses entered his room, remaining until around 10 p.m. Bob exited minutes after the hooded figure, and they were seen kissing in the parking lot before departing in separate vehicles. Intriguingly, Bob did not return to his hotel room until the early hours of the next morning. If he hadn't pursued the person in the hoodie, where had he gone? The detectives continued to investigate, wanting to know more about the mysterious person in the hoodie. As they reviewed earlier footage, they discovered that the person in the hoodie was a young blonde woman. The questions remained. Who was she? What was her relationship with Bob? And could she be connected to Sandra's murder? Furthermore, the detectives checked Bob's work records. They found out that Bob had canceled his scheduled business activities for March 14th and 15th. This contradicted his alibi, making it clear that Bob had lied about the purpose of his trip. Bob's behavior and the new information made him the prime suspect in Sandra's murder. The police needed more evidence, but it was becoming clear that Bob was hiding something important. The investigation was far from over, and the detectives were determined to find the truth about what happened to Sandra. This combination of suspicious behavior, a mysterious girlfriend, and discrepancies in Bob's story kept the detectives on high alert as they continued their investigation. They needed to uncover more details that would lead them to Sandra's killer. The second suspect in Sandra's murder was Carol Morgan, the blonde woman seen with Bob in the hotel video. Carol is a striking 24-year-old personal trainer known for her seductive demeanor and dedication to fitness. She was highly popular among male clients and had a reputation for getting too close to married men, sparking some gossip in the community. Both Bob and Sandra had known Carol for a while. Bob had hired Carol as his personal trainer, and she often visited their house for training sessions. Because of this, Carol was a familiar presence in Bob and Sandra's lives. Detectives Martinez and Harris decided to question Carol. They wanted to find out more about her relationship with Bob and any possible connection to Sandra's murder. When they brought Carol in for questioning, she seemed confident and cooperative. She answered their questions about her relationship with Bob. As the interrogation continued, the detectives began to uncover more about Carol's relationship with Bob. It came to light that Bob and Carol were having an affair. Carol remained unflustered when she admitted to the affair, but denied any involvement in Sandra's murder. Her calm demeanor and lack of emotion struck the detectives as unusual. Carol's affair with Bob added a new layer to the investigation. The detectives asked Carol if she knew about Sandra's murder or if she had been involved in any way. Carol denied any involvement, insisting that she had nothing to do with Sandra's death. She claimed that her relationship with Bob was purely for fun and had nothing to do with any crime. The detectives were not entirely convinced by Carol's story. They decided to look deeper into her background and her activities around the time of Sandra's murder. They wanted to see if there were any clues that might link Carol to the crime. The detectives followed up on Carol's alibi by interviewing her friends. They confirmed that Carol was indeed with them on the night of the murder, but something about the consistency of their stories seemed rehearsed. The detectives noted this and obtained Bob and Carol's phone records, discovering multiple calls between them over the past months. This suggested they were in regular contact, and it didn't look good for both Bob and Carol. As the investigation progressed, both Bob and Carol remained persons of interest. Bob's suspicious eagerness and Carol's too-perfect composure left the detectives with more questions than answers. The complex relationships and potential motives added layers to the case, making it clear that solving Sandra's murder would require thorough and careful investigation. On March 18, 2022, 3 days after Sandra's body was found, a significant piece of evidence surfaced. Detective Martinez discovered a series of emails between Bob and Carol. These emails detailed their affair and included discussions about Sandra. While the emails did not explicitly mention a plan to harm Sandra, they contained suspicious hints that suggested otherwise. "I think about your young, tight body all the time," Bob wrote to Carol. "I can't wait for the time when you and I can be together every night," Bob added. "Sandra is definitely way past prime." The emails were found on Bob's laptop, which the detectives had seized as part of their investigation. Detective Martinez carefully reviewed each message. One email from Carol read, "You can have my body every minute of the day, but you need to do something about Sandra first." Another from Bob mentioned, "I'll handle it soon." These cryptic messages were enough to raise alarm bells for the detectives. In addition to the emails, the detectives uncovered surveillance footage from a nearby park. The footage showed Carol meeting with another man on the evening of March 12th, just days before Sandra's murder. This man was later identified as Alan Wilson, a 23-year-old computer specialist known for his quiet demeanor and intelligence. Alan was a regular at the local chess club and often worked late hours on complex computer projects. The footage showed Carol and Alan engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation, their body language suggesting the meeting was significant. At one point, they were seen passing a small item between them, which the detectives speculated could be crucial evidence linked to the crime. Just as Carol was about to leave, Alan stopped her, and they shared a prolonged kiss, indicating a deeper connection between them. This new evidence suggested a deeper conspiracy involving more than just Bob and Carol. Detectives Martinez and Detective Harris decided to bring Alan Wilson in for questioning. They were now looking at the possibility that Alan was involved in the planning or execution of the murder. The detectives also continued to analyze the digital evidence from Bob's laptop, hoping to find more clues that could connect the dots. The discovery of these emails and the surveillance footage added a new layer of complexity to the case. It was becoming clear that Sandra's murder was not a simple crime of passion, but a calculated act involving multiple people. The detectives were determined to uncover the full extent of the conspiracy and bring everyone involved to justice. As the investigation progressed, the community of Savannah remained on edge. The detectives worked tirelessly, knowing that solving this case would require piecing together every fragment of evidence they could find. Alan Wilson, a 23-year-old computer specialist, was brought in for questioning. During the interrogation, Detectives Martinez and Harris found Alan to be calm but evasive. He provided vague answers about his relationship with Carol Morgan and his involvement with Bob Harper. When asked about his meeting with Carol on the evening of March 12th, Alan claimed they were discussing a work-related project. However, his explanation lacked specifics and raised further suspicion. The detectives pressed Alan for more details, but he remained composed and offered little additional information. His evasiveness made the detectives more determined to uncover the truth. They decided to dig deeper into Alan's digital activities, hoping to find concrete evidence of his involvement in the murder plot. The investigation reached a breakthrough when forensic analysis traced the digital trail of Alan's hacking activities back to him. They discovered that Alan had used his computer skills to hack into Bob's financial records. Detectives Martinez and Harris confronted Alan with this evidence. They presented him with records of the unauthorized access to Bob's bank accounts. Alan's calm demeanor began to crack under the pressure of the mounting evidence. Alan admitted to accessing Bob's accounts at first. Alan refused to reveal that Carol had manipulated him into hacking Bob's financial records. He was hesitant and scared, but the detectives pressed him for more information. When the detectives informed Alan that Bob and Carol were having a sexual relationship, Alan finally broke down and confessed. Alan confessed that Carol seduced him by sleeping with him and manipulated him into hacking Bob's bank accounts with a promise of more sex. He said he had no idea that Carol was also having sex with Bob. Alan felt betrayed and angry when he found out the truth. Alan explained that Carol had told him she planned to extort money from Bob, claiming it was rightfully hers and that she worked hard for it. Whenever Alan asked her to clarify, she would always change the subject. Alan asserted that Carol never mentioned harming anyone and insisted he was unaware of any plan to murder Sandra. He expressed shock and devastation upon learning about her death. The detectives listened carefully to Alan's story. They needed to determine if he was telling the truth or if he was more involved than he admitted. Alan maintained his innocence regarding the murder, insisting he had no idea who killed Sandra. He seemed genuinely upset about being manipulated by Carol. Alan's confession about hacking Bob's accounts and being manipulated by Carol added another layer to the investigation. It showed that Carol was willing to go to great lengths to get what she wanted, even if it meant using someone like Alan. The detectives continued to piece together the puzzle, determined to bring all the responsible to justice. As the investigation unfolded, the community of Savannah followed the developments closely. It became evident that Bob killed his wife Sandra under Carol's manipulation. Carol used promises and cunning arguments to persuade Bob, convincing him that they could only be together if Sandra was out of the picture. She argued against divorce, warning it would ruin his career and social standing, and emphasized that divorce would mean sharing his wealth with Sandra. Carol knew Bob valued his wealth and status, using these factors to manipulate him into believing that eliminating Sandra was the better option. Carol's true nature was revealed through her actions and words. She was a greedy woman who wanted Bob's money and was willing to go to extreme lengths to get it. She didn't care about the consequences or the people she hurt along the way. Detectives Martinez and Harris uncovered that Carol had been planning this for quite some time. She knew Bob would be captivated by her beauty when they first met at a party. He then hired her as his personal trainer, and their affair began from that point. Bob and Carol would often secretly have sex in the house behind Sandra's back and would also meet out of town in various hotels for passionate encounters. During the investigation, the detectives uncovered more text messages and emails between Carol and Bob. These messages showed how Carol had slowly and methodically convinced Bob to commit the crime. Carol skillfully used her words and actions to manipulate Bob into believing that killing Sandra was the only way to secure their future happiness. She knew exactly how to push his buttons and exploit his weaknesses. She used flattery, promises, and fear to control him. Carol painted a picture of a perfect life together, full of love and passion, free from the problems that Sandra's presence created. As the detectives pieced together the evidence, it became clear that Carol was the mastermind behind Sandra's murder. With enough evidence gathered, Detectives Martinez and Harris were ready to make arrests. On March 20, 2022, the detectives arrested Bob for carrying out the murder under Carol's manipulation. They arrived at Bob Harper's office, a sleek real estate agency in downtown Savannah. Bob was in the middle of a meeting with clients when the detectives walked in. He looked up in shock as they approached him, showing their badges and informing him that he was under arrest for the murder of his wife, Sandra Harper. Bob's reaction was one of utter panic. He stammered protests, insisting he was innocent and that there had been a mistake. His employees and clients watched in stunned silence as Bob was handcuffed and led out of the office. Detectives Martinez and Harris also arrested Carol, the true mastermind behind the entire scheme. Carol had cunningly used her sexual allure to manipulate Bob into murdering his wife. She believed she had complete control over him, so much so that she arrogantly dismissed any possibility of Bob breaking free from her influence and exposing her role in the crime. Her manipulation didn't stop with Bob. She had also ensnared Alan, convincing him to hack into Bob's bank accounts. Carol's confidence in her ability to manipulate men into doing her bidding was her downfall. She underestimated Bob's and Alan's potential to break free from her spell and reveal the truth to the authorities. Initially, Bob was reluctant to implicate Carol. However, the detectives cleverly revealed to him that Carol was also involved in a sexual relationship with Alan, and with Alan's help, she hacked into his bank accounts, planning to run away with his money. Realizing he had been manipulated by Carol, Bob was shaken by the gravity of his actions and eventually confessed everything to the detectives, including Carol's role in orchestrating the murder. Similarly, guilt-ridden and fearful of the consequences, Alan disclosed how Carol had manipulated him into committing the cybercrime. Carol's arrogance and belief in her invincibility led to her capture. Her carefully constructed web of deceit unraveled as the detectives pieced together the testimonies of her former puppets, ultimately bringing her criminal activities to light. Her greed and ruthlessness had led to tragedy, and now she would face justice for her crimes. Detectives Martinez and Harris were also determined to bring Alan Wilson to justice. Although Alan claimed he did not know about the murder plot, he had illegally accessed Bob's financial records, aiding Carol's scheme. The detectives gathered the remaining evidence needed to secure a warrant for Alan's arrest. Alan was arrested for his role in the crime, even though he insisted he had no idea about the plan to kill Sandra. Sandra's family, while devastated by her loss, expressed a sense of relief that justice was being served. They had been in a state of anguish since Sandra's murder, and the news of Bob's arrest brought them some measure of closure. They were particularly shocked to learn about the involvement of Carol, a regular visitor to the Harper home. The community of Savannah watched closely as the case continued to unfold, shocked by the betrayal and manipulation at the heart of this tragic story. The detectives' relentless pursuit of the truth had paid off, and they were committed to ensuring that all those involved in Sandra's murder faced the consequences of their actions. As the legal process moved forward, the people of Savannah hoped for a fair and just outcome that would honor Sandra's memory. The trial for Sandra Harper's murder began on December 5, 2022, in Savannah, Georgia. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members, and curious locals. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Sarah Bennett, a determined and sharp 45-year-old lawyer known for her tough stance on crime. Bennett argued that Bob Harper, under Carol Morgan's manipulation, killed his wife to avoid a messy divorce that could ruin his career and social standing. Bennett presented compelling evidence, including incriminating emails between Bob and Carol, hotel footage of the two together, and phone records showing frequent communication. She contended that Bob, desperate to be with his girlfriend while preserving his career and lifestyle, committed the murder of his wife. The defense attorney, James Caldwell, was a 50-year-old lawyer known for his calm demeanor and skillful defense strategies. Caldwell argued that Bob was a victim of Carol's sexual manipulation, which drove him to kill his wife. He highlighted Bob's clean record and his cooperation with the police as proof that he was not a cold-blooded killer. As the trial progressed, emotional testimonies from Sandra's family members painted a vivid picture of the loss they had suffered. Her parents, James and Margaret Collins, spoke about their daughter's kindness, her dedication to teaching, and the impact of her death on their lives. The jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching a verdict on December 7, 2022. Bob Harper was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Carol Morgan was also found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and received a 25-year prison sentence. Allen, who cooperated with the investigation, received a lesser sentence of 5-year imprisonment. Sandra's family expressed relief at the verdict, but were also saddened by the whole ordeal. They felt justice had been served, but knew that no punishment could bring Sandra back. The community of Savannah felt a mix of shock and closure as the trial had revealed the dark depths of betrayal and manipulation behind the murder. After the trial, life for all involved began to change dramatically. Bob Harper's world had been shattered, and nothing would ever be the same again. Bob started his life sentence in a Georgia state prison. He spent his days reflecting on his actions and the choices that led to his downfall. Once a respected real estate businessman, Bob's life had completely unraveled, and he became a cautionary tale about the consequences of falling for manipulative schemes. Bob felt deep remorse for killing his wife, Sandra. As he sat in his cell, the reality of his actions weighed heavily on him. He was haunted by the memory of what he had done, especially how he had tried to portray Sandra as an adulterous wife. Bob had posed her dead body to make it look like she had been unfaithful, but the truth was far from that. Sandra was a very good and kind person who had always been loyal and loving. Bob remembered the many ways Sandra had shown her kindness. She was always helping others, whether it was volunteering at the local shelter or simply being there for friends and family when they needed support. Sandra had a warm smile and a gentle heart, making everyone around her feel valued and loved. As he thought about their life together, Bob was filled with guilt and shame. Sandra had always been a faithful wife, and he had repaid her loyalty with betrayal. His affair with Carol and the subsequent murder were acts of utter selfishness and cowardice. Bob knew that Sandra deserved a loyal husband who would stand by her side. Instead, he allowed himself to be manipulated by Carol's lies and promises. The realization that Carol had used him hit him hard. She had manipulated him into committing the murder, knowing he would take the fall for his wife's death, leaving Carol free to abscond with money from his bank accounts, which he had accessed through Allen's computer skills. In his moments of reflection, Bob vowed to honor Sandra's memory by telling the truth and facing the consequences of his actions. It was a small step, but it was all he could do now to show his remorse and respect for the woman who had deserved so much better. Carol Morgan and Alan Wilson were sent to separate prisons to serve their prison sentences. Carol, once a beautiful personal trainer, struggled with the reality of prison life. Her once vibrant personality faded as she faced the consequences of her actions. Alan, the quiet computer specialist, retreated even further into himself, spending his time in prison libraries and avoiding other inmates as much as possible. Detectives Martinez and Harris continued their work in Savannah, receiving commendations for their thorough investigation and successful resolution of the case. The public praised their dedication and perseverance, and the case became a benchmark for future investigations in the area. Sandra's family tried to move forward, though the pain of their loss was ever present. Her parents, James and Margaret, found solace in their community and church, where they received an outpouring of support. They started a scholarship fund in Sandra's name to help students pursuing a career in education, hoping to keep her memory alive through positive contributions to the community. The community of Savannah slowly returned to normal, but the memory of Sandra's murder lingered. The case of Sandra Harper's murder left a lasting impact on everyone involved. It was a stark reminder of how quickly life can change and the devastating effects of betrayal and manipulation. As time passed, the community worked to heal, always remembering the kind-hearted teacher who was taken too soon.